the police officers here.
No.
He's got like a... Dude, what?
What's he got?
He's got like a big steel pipe. Oh, this dude's gonna get smacked by a car. He's a plumber. He's doing a... I'm headed off to repair job. Let me do it. Let me do it. Come on, let me in there. Okay, we'll see how long the GoPro lasts because I'm tormented by the beeping, not knowing what's going on. A few weeks ago, I had somebody ask, how do I splice the wires on a Ruckus carb kit? I thought to myself, that's crazy. How do you not know how to splice wires? That being said, I've been an electrician for 13 years, so this stuff comes second nature to me. I'll kind of show you guys the basics, what to do, what not to do, what type of connectors I use, and what you're gonna need if you want to do some work on like an OEM connector or harness, right? So you swap a motor in and you need to change wires, you need to do blinkers, LED, resistors, whatever. This theory is all gonna apply. And I'll show you some of the tools here that we typically use. I'll show you the difference between stranded and solid. So we'll just start with the basics. I'll go through all these items, okay? You have two types of wire here. You have solid, and I'll show you what solid is. Solid is just one strand of wire. You don't want this. I don't know why we have this, but this is not what you want. The crimp connector is not gonna be very good. This is good for soldering. It's not good for crimping because this wire is not gonna really compress, right? It's one wire. So this is considered solid wire. What that means is it's one strand, it's one thick strand. It's not what you want. So when you're buying wire, make sure you buy stranded. So that's solid wire. This is stranded. All your wires on your bike are going to be stranded. They're soft, they're pliable, they're not going to get brittle and snap. This up over time, if I kept going like this, it would eventually break because naturally it's one strand bending, it's thicker, and it's going to snap. You don't want that. Something to keep in mind on this, okay, you see 14 AWG, that's gauge. So with wire, it's the larger the number, the smaller the wire. And that's not the overall, okay, that's the circumference of all the strands together, right? So this is probably like 18 or 20 or something. This is 14, your starter wire is going to be like a 8 or 6 or 10 or something like that. So the smaller the number, the larger the actual wire. So keep in mind, you also want to make sure you have fuses as well, okay? You come off the battery, right off the battery, you want to have a fuse, and you need to have this wire sized for the fuse, right? Your fuse is there to protect everything downstream, and I'll kind of explain that to you as well. So if you're starting from scratch, like that SR50, we have a whole new harness on it, totally custom. The Aerox had a harness on it. You start from one point and you work your way all the way down. Don't cheap out, buy bigger wire. Now, if you're doing LED blinkers or something like that, you can use something smaller. But if you're using, I mean, in general, 14 gauge is going to be really good. That's going to be a really good size. 12 gauge is going to be a good size. 10 is a little big. It depends on what you're doing. Starter wire, the bigger the better. Ground wires, also the bigger the better because your starting current's going to flow through that wire. Oftentimes you'll see grounds on aftermarket GY6 Ruckus harnesses and they're too small and they melt, and or you go to crank it over and this gets really hot because it's trying to shove all that current, and there's a lot of resistance between here and here. The larger the gauge wire, the easier for that current to flow. Okay, so it's going to be safer. Bikes have caught on fire. It's a problem. So make sure your fuse is sized properly. All you have to do is look up ampacity of 14 gauge wire and it'll tell you what the ampacity is. That's the fuse you want to install to protect everything downstream. If you put the right size fuse in, there's not really any risk of anything happening to your wire shorting or melting or whatever. So that's kind of just the basics on the gauges and the protection that you want. I'll kind of Show you guys the tools, heat shrink connectors. One thing I will say is electrical connections are probably one of the biggest things that make bikes fail or stop working or cause issues. Don't rush this. Don't cut corners. Take your time. Use the right connectors. I know sometimes it's difficult. You got to have a wide array of connectors and the different ring terminals. Make sure you do it right. If you do it wrong, you're going to have problems. Electrical connections are absolutely, in my opinion, if you're doing a custom bike, that is the biggest issue, is people doing it improperly. Wrong size wires, cheap connectors. That being said, let's go over the tools. Klein makes a couple really good tools. This is Gardner Bender, I think. Gardner Bender, yeah. So this is a really good tool here. It's got your different crimps for your crimp, little crimp connections. Okay, this is what some people will use, and it's really not. It's not the right tool, and I'll show you why. This is where you would put. So obviously you don't have much leverage here. All your leverage is right here. So some guys will crimp like that right here, but that's not really the right tool. Okay, this is the right tool for this job. These go in the garbage. Okay, these are Paul's, so I won't throw them away, but they're total junk. Here, you're not gonna get a good, you're not gonna splice, or you're not gonna strip very good, because it's just a cheap connection. These don't work very good. Like, the whole thing is just, they're just not very good. So don't use these, they're trash. Get yourself, again, Klein, Greenlee, or some good quality strippers are gonna look like this. They're gonna be not that much, 12 to 20 bucks. Make sure, see, I've got 10 to 22, so I have all that size, all the right sizes there. Make sure that you get the right range. Some are going to be super small, some are going to be really big. Like, this is not going to be, actually this would be good for residential stuff, like doing your house wiring. So these you can use in the house, use all around. These are garbage, so get rid of these. Those are junk. This is another tool. These are called linemans. These are Nipex or Nipex. So these are better because they have this little cutout here, this little shape. Those are for crimping. This is not for crimping. That flat surface is not for crimping. What you're looking for is that little U shape right there. That's going to get you a good connection. So this would be my first choice. Okay, if Paul stole these, I couldn't find them. This would be my second choice right here. However, just stop, get the right tools. Again, you're only looking at basically these 3 tools are all that you really need, and this isn't even a necessity. And you're talking 50 bucks for these 2 tools. So very cheap, very good quality. The way that we actually loosen these things up when they get rusty outside is we'll spray them with lube and throw them on the ground. And, well, not these ones because they have a tip, but these tools are made to be really robust. Again, Gardner Bender, Greenlee, Klein, those are your 3 brands. This is, I mean, this is industrial grade. These are what we used to use out in the field. Again, they don't really wear out as long as you take care of them, keep them greased. This is a handy little tool, not really necessary. This is called a flush cutter. These are good for cutting zip ties and whatnot. They're also really good for getting a nice, clean, perfect cut on your heat shrink. Not required. You can always use something like this too as well. But again, this is a bulkier, bigger tool. These are really nice for your zip ties as well. I would say priority-wise, the most important tools here are probably going to be these 3 guys right here. The other tool you're gonna want is a heat gun. You can use a torch. Heat guns definitely work a lot better. Torches work totally fine, but if you get it too hot, you can melt the connector. You can melt it with this too. It's gonna melt a lot faster with the torch. Some guys like the little butane torches, little crack pipe torches if you're into that. I typically go for this. In a pinch, if I can't get to a plug-in or whatever, then I'll go ahead and use a torch, but that works out really good. Got the tools out of the way here, guys. Heat shrink, and I'll show you how heat shrink works. I wouldn't say heat shrink is a necessity. It's just, with electrical stuff, the more time you spend doing it properly, the better. Heat shrink is really good for going over a wire. I'll show you how this works. Heat shrink is really good. You can even use it in an area around a headset, or maybe where the wire may be like rubbing up against the surface. You can put some heat shrink on there to give it some added protection. Again, I'll show you guys how this stuff works. Very simple. You got to get the right size. You don't need a million miles like us. They sell these little handy kits with all these different little chunks and sizes of heat shrink. So make sure you get the right size. If you get a piece of heat shrink like this that's too big, and you slide it over a wire like this, it's always gonna be loose. Okay, hot dog down a hallway type of thing. Like for this type of wire, you know, basically the smaller the better. You're gonna get a much better tighter fit on there. I'll show you guys how heat shrink works. Super simple stuff.
Carburetor vacuum piston hose for a 2018 GY6 Honda Ruckus.
Hey John, he's looking for a carburetor piston hose for 2018 GY6 Ruckus Honda.
What you're gonna do is take your little heat gun here. And you're gonna watch it. Rotate it around a little bit. See how it just sucks right down to the wire? That's what you're going for. It works really good a few different ways. So you can do that on one wire. What I like to do, I'm not sure if I'm gonna have the right size here. And it just, you can see it's just really tight. Sometimes what I like to do here is, see if I have the right size. I like to do two wires together. So say you have 3-4 feet of wire that's running through the bike, and you want a nice clean connection, and you want to keep those wires close together. You can take one piece of heat shrink that's the right size. You can slide 2 wires in it, like so. And again, you can do this as long as you want. You can do this 10 feet, you can do this 20 feet, you can do as long as you want. The important thing is making sure you have the right size heat shrink for the wires. This red heat shrink is not as good. It doesn't suck down as tight. Heat shrink, if you want good stuff, go to Plaid Electric. That's like the Amazon stuff is not really good. You want a good quality heat shrink. You don't want, like this red stuff is just, you can see it's not really, it's not really that good. So that's not good heat shrink. We don't really use that often. I typically use the black, but you get the point. You can get 2 wires together like that really nice, but it's hot still. So you understand that theory, it's got to cool down. Next, let's talk about connectors. What I use are these style connectors. This is a bullet style, and it's going to be, where is it? So this is your bullet type of connection. Maybe. So that's going to go like that. Now, let's say you're connecting something and you've got 12 volts and you're going to connect it. Let's say it's a blinker or whatever. What you want to do is you want to make sure this is 12 volts and this is feeding your light. And the reason why is if this is your 12 volt hot and it comes out of the connection, touches your frame, you're gonna ground something out. Same theory as an electrical outlet, right? Or an extension cord. You're gonna plug it in. If the other end was open and you had exposed terminals coming out of the wall, right? That's not kosher. So you want this to be your supply of voltage. You want this one that's exposed to be what's receiving it. So you have your battery down here and you have, let's say, your ignition switch down here. You want it to be like this, okay? If it's like this, and this is coming from your battery, this connection comes loose and touches your frame, you're gonna melt something, you're gonna cause a problem, you're gonna light the bike on fire. Again, important thing to remember, all these things add up. Make sure the side that's covered in plastic that's protected is gonna be the hot side. When I mean hot, I mean that's your positive, your 12 volts, okay? Those are your bullet connectors. And then you have, these are just splices. They're basically 2 openings, 2 wires are gonna come in. You're gonna heat that up and you're gonna heat this up and it's gonna pinch together. I'll show you how that works as well. This is called a fork terminal. Not a big fan of these. That's gonna go, so you're gonna have a bolt and it's gonna go under a bolt head. The issue with these was you tighten them down, it's gonna spin. Sometimes if you don't use the right size, these forks can pry apart. So again, not a big fan of these unless you kind of have to. That's a ring terminal, come in a lot of different sizes. This would be like something you use for like a battery or a ground or something like that. Also, something to keep in mind, 3M heat shrink, that's what you want. Don't buy junk like these things here. This like kind of cheaper, harder plastic. These are trash, okay? They're gonna come apart. The first time you crimp it, this black thing, this blue part pretty much smashes and comes off. And then you have a bunch of exposed metal. You wanna have the bare minimum amount of exposed metal because that's less risk of it contacting something else. So again, that's a ring terminal. Then you're gonna have spades, okay? That's a male spade. See, what's nice about these is everything's protected. These wires come apart, you're not gonna arc against the frame because you have protection there. So again, just please use the good connectors and the right connectors.
So is that the 14 Pro Max Generation 6 XR?
So there's a female spade. You can see she's a female there, ready for her male partner. Or, well, I better not go down that road because I may offend somebody. So now you can use red with a yellow and this and that, but the theory behind this is to use color for color. So that's a male on that side. Okay, that's a male. That's an outie. That's a female. That's an innie. Again, good quality connectors. This portion here is the heat shrink part. As you read, it says 10 to 12 AWG. So technically, that is too small a wire. The red is 18 to 22. So this is too small of a connector for this. So they're color coordinated. So the color that you choose is going to be appropriate for the gauge. Okay. If I use this giant thing, you can see it's huge, and I crimp it down on here, it's likely going to be loose. Then you've got your blue. The blue is probably the right size for this stuff here. Can't see anything on it. Anyways, make sure you read what the connector says to make sure it's the right size. I think it's 12 to 16. So you can look down and see the diameter too. If you skip any of these steps and you use the wrong size connectors, you use crummy connectors, you don't take my advice, and you have issues, you gotta take a minute, take time on this. This is something that cannot be rushed, or you will have problems. That being said, I've wired bikes from top to bottom, completely new harnesses, and never had any issues because you take your time and you do this right. This is the fuse connection I was talking about. That goes on your battery. Okay, you got a little fuse guy here. This is a mini fuse. They make bigger ones too. That's going to go to the battery. This is going to go to your ignition or whatever you want. This is where I was saying on this end, you would want to make sure your connection you have, let's say you just had these two, you don't want to go like this. Because as you see, you're riding, this thing pops off, touches the frame, it grounds out. You're creating a short. So that's how you would want to have that. That way, if the connection comes off, you're going to be safe. You're not going to have any problems. But make sure the very first wire that comes off to feed everything in your harness, you have a fuse. If you don't have a fuse, your bike blows up or catches on fire, I'm not sorry because you didn't pay attention to the video. Okay, I'm going to show you guys. First off, let's use a little crummy connection here. Let's use a little. I'm going to use a little crummy connection here, and I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to use the wrong tools. Okay, over here. Now it does work. They're typically not as good. Sometimes too, you'll pull out some strands as well like that. See, you don't want to do that. The way you do is you're going to cut it. You're going to twist it like so. And what you want to do is get it to be roughly about the same length to where the wire is going in and protected by this plastic, but you don't want it sticking out too much. This is where the flush cutters come in good, because oftentimes if you use the wrong tool, you'll just kind of butcher the end of the wire. Okay, so that's a nice, you've got all your strands in there. Remember, if you got a bunch of strands falling out, you could have just taken this from a wire that could handle 10 amps to a wire that could handle 8 amps or 6 amps. So keep that in mind. Now what you're gonna do is slide this puppy in here. And again, you wanna make sure you don't want it like this, hanging out like that, okay? What's the purpose of this little blue shield here if your copper's hanging out? You wanna make sure you have it all the way in. Now, you could use something like this and crimp it, and it's probably gonna work, but it's just not gonna work as good. Because typically, see, pulls right out. Again, that took some force, but you guys can understand my point. Once that happens, that's garbage. It can't be reused. Kobe. Next thing, so I'm going to show you guys a 3M and how this is going to work. So let's go ahead and use, let's use this guy here. So you can see it's going to sit just like that. If you make this too long, it's going to push into the next. This is basically, the right side is for one wire, the left side is for another. There's a little tiny stopper in the middle. So if you make it too long, it's going to stick out. You're going to have your copper exposed. So you want to bury that thing all the way in there. Now what you want to do is you're gonna, on the left side of this, you're gonna crimp. You're gonna crimp the left side, like so. Okay, so now that guy's crimped. Now, let's say this is the side of your, let's say this side is your connection for your, actually let's do this. So you got a Ruckus carburetor, right? This is, say this is your choke wire, or say this is the wire coming off of your carburetor or the wire coming off your choke, okay? So you've got 2 wires here, 2 wires here. I'm just gonna show you guys how to make these connections. So, super simple. Let's do this, keep this puppy in here. You're gonna take your factory connector. These look like a smaller gauge, so I'm gonna probably use the red wires there. That looks like probably a 18, I'm guessing. And this is why it pays to have a kit that has a bunch in it. Looks a little long there. That's, yeah, that's pretty small. Let's see what we got here. See if we have a bullet that size. Yeah, we'll use the red. Okay, so this is not a heat shrink, okay? So that's a heat shrink. This is not a heat shrink. That's what you want to use. There's really, the stuff you guys are going to get at the hardware store, O'Reilly Auto Parts, or wherever you're going is just trash. So if it's not a heat shrink, it's not going to be a good connection. So I'm going to crimp that puppy down. And you're going to come over here. I'll show you 2 different ways of doing this. Let's just start with this guy. Yeah. So you typically kind of see the brown wire. It starts to look glossy. And you'll see it. You want to go all the way around. And basically what's happened now is it's crimped, and you've created a 3/4 inch connection that's pinched, that's going to squish glue itself to that wire. So odds are that thing's never going to come off unless you really reef on it. Another thing you can do, I should have mentioned earlier, is this is kind of a cool trick. Is you can, now depending on if this wire is 2 feet long or 3 feet long or whatever, it doesn't really matter one way or the other, but let's do it like this. A couple ways you can do this if you want to. Maybe. Now that heat shrink may be too large. Oh, there it goes. You can do it like that. Okay, you can heat shrink this over the top of this, or vice versa. I'm gonna leave this here. Stupid safety on this gun makes me reset it every time. Oh. So I'm gonna heat shrink this guy here. Okay. Now I'm gonna slide my heat shrink up like so. Actually, let's wait. Oh, she's starting to. All right, jump the gun on that. Okay, so let's do the other side of this connection. That's yours. This is just if you're gonna crimp 2 wires. You guys are just gonna splice 2 wires together. So I'm gonna fire it up on workout supplement drink, so I'm going 100 miles an hour. Slide this puppy in here. Take this guy. Give the old crimperoonie. So this heat shrink, if you want to do what I'm doing here, what I'm going to do, you would have to slide this heat shrink on prior. The heat shrink is going to have to be on here first, because naturally this is going to be to your battery or to your motor, your carburetor, or whatever. So that's how you make a connection that's not made to be taken apart. Now you've got this is never coming apart, okay? Not unless something flies off the bike and gets yarded off the bike and dragged down the street. It's very, very unlikely that that's going to come off. Let's see if this heat shrink is going to be the right size to slide over here. Got to be quick because the connection's warm. Okay, so see how I did that? You slide it right over. Now this is already going to start to shrink down a little bit because the connector's hot. Those are called butt splices. And then I just put some heat shrink over the top of it. So that's an example of a really good connection in my opinion. Now you can do the same with this here. This is your bullet connection. And this is going to be the same theory for a spade or bullet or whatever type of connection you want. Now if you just want to sleeve the end of it, you can do the same thing. Typically take this guy, go up here. That's how I would do another connection coming off a carburetor or whatever. This side would be to your battery or wherever your power is coming from. This side would be the 12 volts going to a blinker or you know, your headlights or something like that. Take your time when you're doing your ring terminals. You know, for your battery, don't use this, use this. This is gonna shake around, and if your bolt tightens down, it's likely gonna break this. And just, you wanna use the right size ring terminals, and as you see, this is really thin versus this is a thicker material. That's a fusible connection. You can buy these like in a pack of 5. 15 amps is gonna be good for 14 gauge. 12 is going to be good for 20. That's most of what you're going to see on a bike. And then 8 is going to be 25. I believe 10 is going to be 30 amp. Think of current as flowing through a wire, just like water flowing through a hose. If you reduce the diameter, which I've done by reducing the amount of surface area of the wires here, you've just in turn raised resistance up, which raises your amperage up and drops your voltage. Larger the wire, the better. You don't need to go crazy. Do your math. It's not that difficult. Make sure your fuse is connecting everything downstream. Don't give haircuts because they cause fires. Thanks for watching. Post up down below other wiring stuff you guys want to see. This is probably one of the biggest failures I've heard of bikes catching on fire before. That's what leaves you stranded. Post down below what you guys want to see next. Thanks for watching. But okay, hold on, wait. We ship the same day. He gets an email.
He gets an email
2
saying
emails.
it shipped, yeah.
Okay.
And then he sends 2 emails on Monday afternoon at 7 p.m. And then he emails again.
Let me hear angry
At
voice.
7 a.m. I don't have that.
You don't
I sent you an email several days ago, which it has been a little over 12 hours between these 3 emails. He says, you still have not returned my message. I was planning on doing business with your company, but it appears there's an incompetence problem here because I do not even receive the item you shipped me, which I paid for, ... Impatiently waiting your response.
Okay.
Impatiently.
So pull up his order. Okay.
And delivery failed because he entered the wrong address, and I told him this.
Oh, is this the one that showed up here on the front that just showed up here?
Yeah.
Okay, so
The intake?
he gave us the wrong address and it came back here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.